on Friday, I sent in the weekend welcome, asking people to look at and think about what their thoughts and what their perceptions are about the trial of Jesus. Because in our Bible reading yesterday was about the trial. Today is actually Easter Sunday. So we're getting at those important parts as the Gospels close. If you are looking for a chance to start up, we begin Acts Tuesday. So if you want to follow us along and read Acts and the letters with everyone, there are reading lists at the exit, so you can join in. The trial of Jesus, right? Of course, we have 4 different accounts in 4 Gospels, and the details are slightly different in them, but basically they build in our minds this composite picture of what the Gospels are. It's similar to Christmas, right? Like in Christmas, when we have our manger scene in the tree and everything's up here, the shepherds and the wise men are all together, and it's, we don't think about, well, the shepherds are in Luke and these are in Matthew. We just kind of have a composite idea of what is going on. The trial is similar in that. But the way that this Bible kind of presents it, the chronological Bible, it really layers the details one after the other, so we can kind of see pretty clearly how they are similar and how they're different, all that kind of stuff. If you close your eyes and you think about the trial of Jesus, what do you see? What are the details that make up that picture? If you were a producer, director of the movie of the trial of Jesus, what would you create on screen? What do you envision about the trial? What time is it? Is it at night? Is it in the morning? In your imagination picture of it, what do you have in your mind's eye about the time of day? And then from where does the picture come, your picture? Is it from a specific gospel? Do you even know? Is it a movie that sticks out in your mind? Something like The Passion of the Christ or The Greatest Story Ever Told? Something where there is a depiction of the movie. It might even be Jesus Christ Superstar or something like that, where the trial of Jesus is shown. Rarely in church or from the pulpit does the trial get all that much time. Because our church holiday calendar works kind of funny. It's that we have Palm Sunday, and then there's Easter Sunday. And so the trial and the crucifixion all takes place during that week. But Maundy, Thursday, if a church gets together and celebrates Maundy, Thursday, that's usually about communion. And Good Friday is usually about the cross itself. So even if you're going to church all of the different Holy Week days, you sometimes miss the trial. The trial doesn't get a lot of play. But this chronological Bible was interesting because it, like I said, it layers all of those things. So the details of this came to life kind of differently for me to see them repeated, stacked on each other. There are many staple moments that we think about. We think about the arrest and the trial, right? Of course, there's the arrest in the garden. That kind of sets it off. Judas betraying Jesus with a kiss. Then you have Peter trying to defend Jesus. Matthew has Jesus saying in that moment, you don't need to defend me because I have 12 legions of angels who would come to my aid if I needed this to be stopped. It's an amazing moment in Matthew to say that. Jesus tells Peter to put down his sword, right? And that makes me think about back a few weeks ago when we were looking at Get Behind Me, Satan. That Peter was looking at earthly things. And here that culmination comes to be in the garden. He grabs a sword and is not thinking about the legions of angels. He just wants to protect Jesus in that moment. Another detail that we remember is Peter denying 3 times with the cock crowing. Luke, on the other hand, shows it doesn't say Peter is the one who strikes the ear, but it's one of the disciples, and it's one of the soldiers. And it's interesting because Jesus touches the ear and heals the cut immediately. Mark has this other amazing detail. The man following Jesus. This is Mark 14, 51 and 52. This is right before what Liz read. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. And when they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. That's one of those details that might not pop out at you unless you're looking for it. We were talking in Sunday school about what that might mean, right? Like, at first I was thinking linen, and I thought about the angel that's going to be with Jesus in the empty tomb, and that the linen and is left there. But we also thought about the idea that when you come to Jesus, he says to leave all your possessions behind and follow. And here's a human being doing the exact opposite, right? When the pressure comes, he leaves all of his possession and runs away. But what we came to, which I think is part of what this detail is about, is that it's like Peter denying 3 times. There's a sense that it's not just Peter, right? It's all of the disciples that find themselves running away. The next detail that we find in Mark's gospel is the bulk of what Liz read. Jesus is taken before the chief priests, and they don't know exactly what the crime is they want to pin on Jesus. They know that they want to put him to death. They know what the sentence is, but they need to find the crime first, and that's what they're struggling with, right? So they're trying all of these different possibilities about this, that, and the other. It's like, what is the thing that's actually going to stick? What's the indictment that's going to come forth that is actually going to allow us to do what we want to do in the first place? We never see that happen in life, do we? No. They get all the people there and they tell stories about what Jesus has done, but none of the stories line up, so they know that none of them are going to find their way into court. It's just not going to work. This story's not going to work because you two are saying different things. This details. None of the stories line up, but this one thing is true, and it's captured so well in the great spiritual, Jesus never said a mumbling word. He doesn't say anything in his defense. He doesn't say anything. Until they ask him, "Are you the Messiah?" And in the Mark version, he says, "I am." And now they have what they need, they think. That moment where Jesus says, "Yes, that is who I am." Matthew and Luke have the detail of Jesus saying, instead of saying, "I am," they add the "you say that I am" part of this. In all 3 of those Gospels, though, the chief priests believe at this moment that they have all that they need. Of course, he doesn't just face one trial, he faces trials from many sides. There are actually 3 trials, right? Not just 1, but 3. There's chief priests, then there's Pilate, then there's Herod, and it's actually a 4th back to Pilate. Right? Is that the trial that you have in your mind? That it's he beats for the chief priests and they drag him to Pilate. And Pilate's like, this guy's a Galilean, he should be tried by Herod. And Herod sends him back. Is that the idea that you have in your mind? It seems that the trial before the Sanhedrin starts at night. Right? Right after the arrest, because there are fires and campfires and streetlights that are fires. And because we think of Peter's denial happening at night, right? Because the cock crows, which would mean that this is the very end of the night. So we picture a cold and lonely beginning of this trial. Mark has it that that trial with the chief priest happens late at night, and then early the next morning they go to Pilate. Matthew has Judas's suicide jammed in there, right? So you have Jesus meets with the chief priest, and then you hear about Judas and what happens to him, and then Jesus is taken before Pilate. And again, it happens on the morning after the arrest. It appears that Pilate doesn't stay up all night. They wait till the morning to take him to Pilate. Luke is the only of the Gospels that has all of the trial happening the next morning. That Jesus is gone before the chief priests in the morning, and then to Pilate, and Luke is the only one that has Pilate sending Jesus to Herod. None of the other ones include that encounter. Herod, of course, then sends him back to Pilate, because he doesn't want to have anything to do with it either. All three of these versions suggest that Pilate does not seem to think that Jesus has committed a crime worthy of death. But he goes along with it. That's a detail that is constant. And then he, as custom requires, allows the crowd. So all of a sudden there's a crowd, right? There's a sense that the early part happened at night in darkness. There wasn't a crowd around. But now all of a sudden when he goes before Pilate, there's a crowd. And as custom requires, the crowd gets a choice. Because the beneficent people that the Romans are, they say, you have these two criminals, they are both bound to death. Which one would you have me release? And the crowd chooses Barabbas. The crowd chooses Barabbas in all three of those Gospels. And the crowd chooses Barabbas every time. Are these the details that you have in your mind? We can see that they're similar, but they're not the same in those three synoptic gospels. And I'm not trying to pull out differences for reason of criticizing the text. Instead, I'm asking you to think about which of the details of this event are in your mind when you picture it. Because I think it's kind of all of them at once. The next question is, what about the Gospel of John? How do those details add to our picture? Many of the details line up, but John has some little details that are added. At the arrest, John puts it this way. Listen to this. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. We even get the servant's name. Jesus commanded Peter, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup that my Father has given me? Listen to that, right? I am in control of this. I have decided to drink from this cup. There's nothing that you could do or anyone could do that could get in the way of this thing happening. In the middle here, Peter denies once. The second two denials come after these next details. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I have always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. Listen to that. No evasion. No hiding, no blaming, no excuse. Just, I said what I said. Go listen to the record. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearly slapped him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? Jesus replies, if I said something wrong, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? That's a good question. Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. And then Peter denies the second and third time. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning. As to avoid ceremonial uncleanness and cleanness, they did not enter the palace, but because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. In other words, this is a state that doesn't have corporal punishment. We need him tried by federal law. This took place to fulfill what Jesus said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "Or did others talk to you about me?" What an interesting reply. Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you've done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." Listen to that. "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world was to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" Pilate retorted. "What is truth? What is truth other than what I say it is? Because I'm Pilate and I'm a Roman and I make the truth. What is truth? What is truth in a world that doesn't know what truth is? What is truth in a world that thinks that truth is relative? What is truth?" The old Johnny Cash song, "The lonely voice of youth cries, what is truth?" What is true anymore? It's an interesting question, and it's written here in this very moment, in this trial. What is truth? I love that question. "I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in his face. They mock him with the truth. They ask him what truth is, and then they mock him with the truth. Put a crown on his head as if a crown was what made you king. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priest answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. I talked to the kids about the idea of how the trial reflects the Garden of Eden. It also reflects Jesus in the desert being tempted by Satan. The details line up almost perfectly in both. This is the culmination of all of this story in this moment. The definition of what sin is and what truth is. Jesus knows who he is. Jesus knows who God is. So what else is there? The reality of who he is and the reality of who God is larger, bigger, and more important than anything they can do to his body. This is the truth that Jesus testifies to in the world. How often, when we are in a similar situation, I don't even think that we could even be in a situation half as bad as this. But in a lesser version of the same thing, how often do we hide, lie, and blame? If we're looking for a major difference between Jesus and ourselves, is this not it? There are two things that are really important about all four versions of the trial. And there's many things, but I'm picking out two. One is that Jesus loses the trial every single time. Jesus loses the trial every single time. And he still does. You see all of these books like The Case for Christ and Proving This About Christ and this, that, and the other. Jesus loses that trial today too. And that leads me to the second piece. Is that in the face of that, he doesn't say a mumbling word. It's not about the trial. It's not about the cross. It's not about what this world can do to Jesus. It's about what Jesus is doing to, in, and for this world. Regardless of what we do. It is awesome. It is amazing. It is wonderful. It should blow our minds completely out of our bodies and leave us just there, stripped, hand in hand with God, with Jesus Christ himself. That's what this trial leaves us with. It is a powerful thing. And it is exactly what we should experience when we come to the table. So let us go. May we say it together.